A game disc slides into an Xbox Series X, the drive spins up, and a few moments later, the same physical copy that has been sitting on your shelf can suddenly unlock digital access on hardware where that little plastic circle could never physically fit. Supported games can reach PC through Play Anywhere. Cloud access can work where available, and the original disc still behaves like a normal transferable game that you can lend, sell, or hand to somebody else. That would already be interesting on its own. But the company behind it makes the whole thing much stranger. Because this is Microsoft, the same Xbox brand that spent 2013 turning physical game DRM into a public relations bonfire. Back then, Microsoft tried to explain why a console needed recurring online checks, account-based licensing, and new rules around used games, and players responded by making the Xbox One reveal one of the easiest corporate disasters to remember. 13 years later, Xbox is back in the same territory, and somehow it looks useful instead of hostile. That is where the story starts getting awkward for PlayStation, because only weeks before Microsoft announced this feature, Sony had already put a date on the end of physical disc production for new PlayStation releases. Beginning in January 2028, those new games stop being produced on disc. The timing makes this more than another Xbox feature. Sony looked at a market moving digital and decided the physical option could disappear, while Microsoft asked whether the same physical purchase could become useful inside the digital system. One company put a cutoff date on the old format, the other found a way to make it work in more places. On August 26th, Microsoft announced disc to digital, with Xbox Insider testing beginning August 31st. Put a supported Xbox One or Xbox Series X disc into a console with a drive, launch it, and Microsoft grants what it calls a digital entitlement. Thousands of games are included at the start, most titles from those generations are supposed to work, and the disc itself keeps doing what a physical game is supposed to do. Before we go any further, like the video, subscribe, and support the channel, because the YouTube algorithm apparently needs constant reassurance before it remembers smaller channels exist. Think of this as the modest administrative fee for making me read corporate licensing language, so you can spend your evening doing something more respectable. Now, if you remember the Xbox One launch, your first reaction to all of this should probably be suspicion rather than applause. A physical disc goes into a console, an account receives a digital right, and Microsoft servers remember the relationship. That sounds dangerously close to the kind of sentence that used to end with some miserable condition about check-ins, permissions, or what happened if you wanted to lend the game to somebody who had the nerve to live in another house. Microsoft does not exactly help itself by calling the thing a digital entitlement, either. That phrase has all the warmth of an insurance document, and immediately reminds you that the extra convenience still depends on an account, a server, and a company deciding that the entitlement remains valid. So, I went looking for the trapdoor, because there had to be one. I expected the usual nonsense. Maybe the disk would permanently lock itself to the first account, maybe Resell would quietly stop working, or maybe there would be some lovely paragraph explaining why lending a game now required 7 menus and a blood sample. Instead, the obvious trap I expected never appears, because the disc keeps working as a normal physical game, which means you can still lend it, sell it later, or simply keep it on the shelf, without permanently welding the extra digital access to your account. If that physical copy changes hands and another account claims it, the entitlement can move with the disc, while disappearing from the previous owner, so Microsoft has not quietly created a permanent second copy that survives after the original game is gone. Picture the sequence rather than the marketing language, because it explains the idea better than the phrase digital entitlement ever could. You buy a supported physical game, put it into the console, claim the extra digital access, and use the supported benefits on PC, compatible handheld hardware, or through cloud gaming, where those features are available. Months later, you sell the disc, somebody else takes it home and claims it, and your extra access leaves with the physical copy, instead of hanging around like a free duplicate. That is a surprisingly sensible answer to a problem that usually ends with the customer being told to buy the same thing twice. It is also where the PlayStation comparison starts becoming uncomfortable, without anyone needing to force the joke. Sony's explanation for ending new physical production is straightforward enough. Digital buying has grown, physical media is declining, and the company is following the way people are already spending money. That logic is easy to understand. The problem is that Xbox has just demonstrated that a market moving digital does not automatically require physical buyers to lose the format they prefer. You can also make the physical purchase useful inside the digital business, which is exactly what Microsoft is trying to do here. None of this magically fixes digital ownership, obviously. The entitlement still depends on Microsoft's infrastructure. Publishers still decide whether their games participate, and not every title is supported. Original Xbox and Xbox 360 discs are not part of this version either, so anyone with 20 years of green cases stacked in a cupboard should probably avoid turning the living room into a victory parade just yet. Those limitations matter, but they do not destroy the basic behavior of the physical copy, and that is where 2013 comes crashing back into the story. Back then, Microsoft also wanted physical games connected to accounts and digital infrastructure. The company talked about cloud features, digital libraries, account access, and the convenience of having your games follow you more easily. But players quickly noticed that the price of admission involved recurring online verification, and a licensing model so awkward that ordinary things like lending and used games started sounding like regulated financial products. A primary Xbox One would have needed to check in every 24 hours, and the wider plan became complicated enough that Sony landed one of the most humiliating blows of that console generation by showing one person handing a game disc to another person. There was no grand technical demonstration and no 10-minute speech about consumer freedom. Sony simply showed a normal human action that Microsoft had somehow managed to make confusing, and the joke practically wrote itself. Microsoft reversed course within days, restoring normal disc trading, lending, resale, gifting, renting, and offline play without the 24-hour requirement. What failed was not the idea that physical purchases could benefit from digital infrastructure. What failed was the order in which Microsoft tried to make people accept it. Back in 2013, Xbox tried to make the physical disc obey the digital licensing system. In 2026, it has effectively reversed that relationship and made the digital system work around the disc instead. The customer keeps the object, keeps resale, keeps lending, and then Microsoft adds account recognition, Play Anywhere support where available, cloud access where available, and whatever other digital convenience the game qualifies for. And suddenly, the same broad ambition that felt like a restriction 13 years ago starts behaving like a feature. Microsoft did not make digital licensing less digital, and it certainly did not stop using servers, accounts, or permissions. It simply stopped making those things the price of keeping the normal behavior of a physical game. Apparently, the lesson from 2013 was not that players hated convenience. They hated being told convenience required giving something up first. Now, bring Sony back into the picture, and the timing becomes almost comically unfortunate. PlayStation is not wrong that digital buying has grown, and nobody needs to pretend physical media is about to storm back and reclaim the market. But Sony treated that trend as a reason to stop manufacturing new physical releases. Microsoft looked at the same trend and found a way to make physical customers more useful to its digital strategy. Imagine both companies presenting their plans on the same stage. An Xbox employee inserts a supported disc, the account recognizes it, the game becomes available through supported digital features, and the physical copy can still be handed to somebody else later. Then a PlayStation employee walks out, places a calendar on the table, circles January 2028, and explains that new physical releases stop there because digital is more popular. At that point, nobody needs to shout that PlayStation looks stupid, because the presentation has already done the work. Even Sony's promise that retailers can still sell digital versions after the cutoff does not really rescue the picture. Because choosing which shop sells you a digital product is not the same thing as choosing whether the product itself is physical or digital. You may still have several checkout counters, but they all lead to the same format, while Xbox has taken the less popular format and given it another reason to exist inside the digital ecosystem. So, come back to the disc from the beginning, because that little object tells the story better than any corporate slide deck. It goes into the Xbox, the console recognizes it, and a purchase that was already useful suddenly reaches more places than it did before. Later, the disc can leave the house, change hands, and take the extra entitlement with it, which means Microsoft gets the connected ecosystem it wanted 13 years ago, without demanding that the customer give up the basic freedoms of the physical copy first. Then, look at the calendar beside it, where January 2028 is already marked as the point from which new PlayStation releases stop being produced on disc. No prophecy is required, and no imaginary next-generation rumor needs to be dragged into the argument. The comparison is already sitting there in plain sight. One company spent 13 years learning how to bring a physical game into a digital ecosystem, without making the customer surrender it first, while the other decided the physical version of future releases could simply stop being made. Somehow, after the Xbox One DRM disaster, Microsoft is the company making PlayStation look old-fashioned about physical games. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.